Three Bruins wins in a row in this economy?
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoke to Beat. Today is Thursday, December 5th, and I want to thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your day every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and it's available free on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. And it is Spotify Wrapped season. So please join my new friend Katie Bogan by sharing whether Locked On Bruins is in your top 5 podcasts for the year, and I'll be sure to give you a shout out on social media. Speaking of social media, you can find the podcast on your favorite social media app, whether it be X, Instagram. Those are the two main ones where you can find it at Locked NHL Bruins. You can find me, my hockey thoughts, dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren, mostly on the new Butterfly app these days and on Instagram. Now, the Bruins winning 4-2 last night over the Chicago Blackhawks. I'm going to bring you all the latest storylines, stats, and signals to take away from that one. We're also going to break down the Bruins that were and were not selected for the Four Nations face-off coming up in February. If you're new to the podcast, I am a lifelong Bruins fan. I've been covering this team for various outlets for almost 20 years now. Was a full-time news editor for The Score, covering all things hockey, and have been hosting this podcast since 2019. And the Bruins' resurgence, with a bit of an asterisk, continued last night, winning 4-2 against the Chicago Blackhawks. They've improved to 6-2 under interim head coach Joe Sacco. However, they've played only one playoff-level team in that stretch, and that was a 2-0 loss to the Vancouver Canucks. They have a game coming up on Saturday against Philly, and then over the next couple weeks, it's going to be a real make-or-break road trip for the Bruins as they will be heading out west to take on all the Canadian teams out west up here, and then, of course, Seattle, which is, almost Canada. We'll preview that on Monday's episode, this big road trip coming up. For now, we're talking about last night's game against the Blackhawks, and while the Bruins did find themselves in an early hole after Alex Vlasic scored a minute and 23 seconds into the game, it was two specific players who stepped up offensively for this team. Morgan Geekie got things going. He scored the first and last goals of this game for the Bruins. Coming out hot after, cracking back on Twitter the other day after it was pointed out that perhaps he wasn't worthy of being in the top 6 or on the top line. He came out with his best game of the season without question, scoring 2 goals and really icing things for the Bruins late when there was still a bit of a chance that the Blackhawks could mount a comeback here. It was 3-2 at one point. The Bruins were up 3-1. Jason Dickinson, who, fun fact, was selected in the first round by the Dallas Stars with the pick the Bruins traded to Dallas in exchange for Jaromir Jagr back in 2013. He made it 3-2 at that point, and then Geekie in the third period burying a breakaway opportunity on Peter Mrazek, who was fantastic in this game, making some big saves. It could have been a bit more lopsided. So Morgan Geekie, his third and fourth goals of the season, making a huge impact. But it was Brad Marchand who also made a huge difference. He reached the 10-goal mark for the 15th time in his career, joining only Ray Bourque, Johnny Bucyk, and Patrice Bergeron as Bruins to achieve that feat. It was also his 81st career game-winning goal, tying Patrice Bergeron for second most in franchise history, with Johnny Bucyk leading the way at 88, which it's not out of the realm of possibility that Brad Marchand could break that record at some point. And, he's just continuing his legendary career here for the Boston Bruins as captain. And as we'll discuss later, he'll also be representing Canada at the Four Nations face-off. Marchand said after the game, they weren't great in the third as Chicago was kind of trying to mount a comeback here, but they got that really key goal from Geekie. The first two periods were good. They, of course, were playing the second of a back-to-back with travel just from Boston to Chicago, but that involves time zone change and all that. So they're definitely happy with the win, getting the points, continuing to climb in the standings. And right now, every point matters, especially after the start that they had. So great for Marchand to get those two quick goals. It seems like the Bruins have been doing that a lot lately, scoring goals in bunches. And Morgan Geekie coming up big with the 2 goals and the 4th one of the night to ice it. Again, the Bruins 6-2-0 since Sacco replaced Jim Montgomery as coach back on November 19th. He describes it still as small increments, trying to help the team get better every day, getting back to an identity that they wanted to reach again. So it's really all about that process. They focus on certain things they can control every day, and hopefully the results can take care of themselves. And so far they have 6-2 under Joe Sacco, again, albeit against some somewhat inferior competition, some big tests coming up with especially this Western road trip that begins next week. The Bruins, again, displayed some resilience, overcoming that early deficit. Marchand's 2 second period goals turned the tide in their favor. Morgan Geekie contributing significantly with his 2 goals, including the game's first and final ones for the Bruins. And Jeremy Swayman making 20 saves, continuing his string of strong play here for the Bruins. Not to be outdone, David Pastrnak assisted on both of Marchand's goals, showcasing some really effective playmaking skills. Still not getting the goals, still not finding the back of the net, but his ability to, we saw it the other night against Detroit, that playmaking with Pavel Zacha to end that game, set up a couple goals here by Marchand in this one. Just fantastic play, getting those primary assists. And again, while the goals are not coming, he is contributing offensively. Primary assist, directly setting up goals. Yeah, he's not scoring, but I mean, that's incredibly important as well. He's now up to closer to point per game average that we'd like to see, 26 points in 28 games. Stuck on 9 goals, however. We'd like to see that rise again. But the big storyline, Marchand's 2 quick goals, rise in the ranks in terms of double-digit goal totals for the 15th time. He also got the game winner, second in franchise history now, tied with Bergeron. Will soon pass him. Could catch Busick for the team record. And also getting in some nice chirps on Biz Nasty on the TNT broadcast, which is becoming a pretty fun rivalry to watch. Now, we'll discuss some more key stats and signals to take away from this game here as the podcast continues. Get in on the action this NFL weekend with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Let's discuss some key stats and trends to take away from last night's game against the Chicago Blackhawks. The Bruins went 0 for 5 on the power play in this one, unfortunately. So that not quite clicking, although they did get some decent looks on the power play. They did kill both of the penalties that they took, however, so it was an even game there when it comes to special teams. Both teams going over on the power play. Unfortunately, Nikita Zadorov did take another penalty, holding against Pat Maroon. They kind of got into it, extending his league lead atop that category. He did go a bit of a stretch there without taking a penalty, but that lack of discipline really continues to hurt the team and put them on the penalty kill unnecessarily. So hopefully he can get back on track in terms of reining it in a little bit. When it comes to 5-on-5 play last night, it was pretty even in terms of shot attempts. Chicago had a slight advantage, 36-34. Shots were 17-16 for the Bruins at 5-on-5. They had even scoring chances, 15-15, but Boston had 5 high danger scoring chances compared to only 4 for Chicago. In all situations, it was a pretty big gap. Like I said, the Bruins didn't score on the power play, but in all situations, they did have 11 high danger chances compared to only 4 for the Blackhawks. Peter Mrazek really stepping up and playing well for this team. The expected goals were 3.32 for the Bruins, 1.24 for the Blackhawks. So in the end, the outcome reflected the underlying stats here in this game. Now, when it comes to the standings, the Bruins, 3 wins in a row. They've won 6 of their past 8, and they are now just 3 points back of the Toronto Maple Leafs for first in the Atlantic, 1 point back of the Panthers. But there's a big caveat there. The Bruins have played 28 games, 3 more than Toronto, 2 more than Florida, and 5 more than Tampa Bay, who is 5 points back. So if you look at point percentages, the Bruins in 4th now, behind Toronto, Florida, and Tampa. And they still have a negative goal differential, although it is climbing. It was, I think, at its worst around minus 21 or so. The Bruins are now at minus 13. If you look at the Eastern Conference as a whole, point percentages, the Bruins have climbed back into the top 8 here, overtaking the Philadelphia Flyers, who they will play on Saturday. So that's going to be a big game for the Bruins here. Both teams have won 3 in a row. Philadelphia, I'm not sure. I bet they play before the Bruins do. In fact, they play tonight against the Florida Panthers. So Florida could do Boston a bit of a solid here by keeping the Flyers down. And while the Bruins are technically in a playoff spot in the Atlantic Division, again, if you look at the wildcard situation, they would be behind Tampa and in the second wildcard spot at the moment, with New York Rangers holding a bit of an edge. Columbus, Philadelphia outside the picture, but that game on Saturday is going to be huge for the Bruins. And that's kind of the signal that we can take away here. The Bruins have played very well under head coach Joe Sacco. They've improved in a lot of areas since he took over from Jim Montgomery. And it's not really a case where he's, that much better of a coach or that Jim Montgomery's not a good coach. It was kind of more of a wake-up call, I think. And the Bruins have simplified their game under head coach Joe Sacco. They have a 750 point percentage. Again, only one playoff level team there. The power play, still not great. It ranks 27th with a 12% success rate. So that really needs to improve. The penalty kill, though, has been fantastic. 95% success rate under Joe Sacco. So the offense still struggling a little bit, although a couple good games here in a row where they've been able to get some offense going. The overall team defense has improved. Penalty kill, 95%. They're allowing only 24 shots on goal, which is third best in the NHL since Sacco took over. And they're generating more shots as well. They are 13th ranked with almost 30 shots for per game. So the Bruins are trending in the right direction, but they do have still some tests to face. Philadelphia on Saturday will be a big one. That's another team that is playing very well. They have a few players going to the Four Nations face-off as well. They are pretty talented on up front on defense. We'll preview this game more tomorrow, of course, and we'll discuss what Philadelphia does tonight against Florida. That will be a big factor in that. But the long and short of it is the Bruins need to show that they can hang with better competition. The quality of competition has been conducive to helping them turn things around, but not really a big litmus test for what this team is actually capable of against playoff level teams. The next 6 games are going to be crucial for this team. Philadelphia, then Winnipeg, Seattle, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton. These are all teams in the playoff race or on the cusp in Philly and Seattle's case. And then to close out the pre-Christmas schedule, they'll host Buffalo and Washington. So it's not an easy month coming up for this team. And while they have made some gains, it's going to be a big test for them to prove that they have indeed turned things around and are back to being the Bruins that we know and love. Now, looking ahead to February, of course, the Four Nations face-off is coming up, and there were some Bruins who were selected to those rosters, and we'll discuss that here as the podcast continues. Who's excited for this completely manufactured tournament that excludes a significant portion of talented players around the NHL? I mean, I'm not super pumped about it, but I'm sure once the games start and you see Canada out there against USA, Finland taking on Sweden, it's going to be pretty exciting, and there will be some Bruins to root for here in this tournament. We already knew that Brad Marchand and Charlie McAvoy were going to be representing Canada and the USA respectively. They were part of the initial selections back in June. A couple other Bruins will be participating as well. Elias Lindholm is going to be playing for Team Sweden, while Jeremy Swayman was selected to the U.S. squad. Not quite sure how much he'll play, as there is quite a glut of talented goaltenders for Team USA. Who are the other selections? Connor Hellebuck, of course, and Jake Ottinger. So you'd expect Hellebuck will be the starter, and Ottinger, Swayman will be fighting for some playing time there. But congrats to all 4 of these guys for making their respective squads. Of course, nobody on Team Finland. So if you have a Bruins rooting interest, you might want to obviously either cheer for Canada, Marchand, USA with McAvoy, Swayman, or Sweden. Speaking of Sweden, there was a notable omission there, and that was Hampus Lindholm. Now, the way he was playing earlier this season, it would have been hard to keep him off that team. He was arguably Boston's best defenseman or all-around player even. But he is battling injury right now. He's out and has been for some time. There's no real timetable for his return. So whether or not they didn't think he'd be ready for this tournament, or they just didn't feel like he had enough reps to overtake somebody else on the team, it would have been nice at least for them to name him to the team and replace him if need be. But he's a guy who will not be there, which is certainly unfortunate. I think when all things are equal and he was healthy, he definitely would have been at least in consideration for a roster spot there. And still could be when it comes to the 2026 Olympics. Now, the egregious thing that I can't get over is Czechia not being part of this tournament as defending world champions, and with David Pastrnak being the face of that country and the best player for the Bruins. And games will be played in Boston, in Montreal. I've always maintained you could easily have included Czechia, Slovakia to have Juraj Slafkovský playing in Montreal, David Pastrnak playing in Boston. Of course, you still will be missing a bunch of very talented players who either didn't crack their team's rosters, like Cole Caulfield in Montreal not making it. You have a guy like Leon Draisaitl, one of the best players in the NHL. So you could have perhaps had a North American squad and a Europe squad, but I understand there are some complications there with a European team, seeing as you'd have to explain why Russian players are not able to attend and all that kind of stuff. So they've kept it to 4 countries, and we'll see here what the outcome is. Of course, also, General Manager Don Sweeney is serving as Team Canada's General Manager. Bruins Team Operations Manager Bree Singh is also serving as Team USA's Services Manager, so some additional representation for the Bruins there. Lindholm, I should add, earned a silver medal for Team Sweden at the 2012 U18 World Championships and the 2013 and 2014 World Juniors. He's represented Sweden at the World Championships and won gold in 2017. Swayman won a bronze for Team USA at the 2018 World Juniors, and he also played for USA at the 2022 Worlds. Brad Marchand, of course, helping Team Canada win the World Cup several years ago with that famous game-winning goal, jumping in the air, one of my favorite all-time hockey photos. He said he was super excited to be playing with Sidney Crosby, Nathan MacKinnon, with whom he trains in the summer and has a great relationship with them. It would be really cool to see Crosby and Marchand. I mean, a whole line of those guys would be amazing. And he said on the TNT broadcast that he was excited to play with Seth Jarvis, who is apparently quite a character. So that's it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, my friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Thank you to those who have subscribed on YouTube, on your favorite podcast app. Again, if you're a Spotify listener, please do share your Wrapped, whether it's on Instagram or on social media, on X, Blue Sky, as my friend Katie did. It really means a lot to be able to see those and see Locked On Bruins in your top 5s. What else? Check out the Locked On Fantasy Hockey podcast next. They'll give you all the tips you need to get in on the action and to win your league. And finally, thank you so much for all the personal support lately. It's been a bit of a rough go personally lately, but it's always great to jump on here and discuss the Bruins and engage in good times with the community here with Locked On Boston Bruins. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and we will talk to you again here on Friday with a brand new episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.